has your coursework come into play, as you wrote your novel? You mentioned that it started in that short story class, and I'd love to hear, a little bit more about how your education has been there throughout the creation of your novel.
Absolutely, yes. The very beginning of the whole story started in a college class. It started in a short story class that I remember getting the prompt for it, and it was like, okay, create a quote and make a story around a quote, a quote that touches your heart, basically. And I sat there for the longest time trying to figure out what I was going to do. And again, I came back to why am I writing a short story? I want to write novels. I don't understand this exercise. And so I was kind of, when you're mopey about a topic, you're like, I don't want to do like, ugh, you know,
Drag your feet.
exactly. I was kind of dragging my feet, and I was trying to figure out what was important to me. And I was unpacking a bedroom at the time. I had just moved, and I was unpacking my room, and I was going through my old journals. And as I was kind of like flipping through it, I was like, wow, the things that mattered to me at 14 years old, I'm shaking my head at right now, right? As I'm reading my old words and how upset I was at some boy I was absolutely, obsessed with. And, reading through those and thinking, I spent so much energy on this topic, but obviously it mattered to me in this moment. And that's when this idea of time and moments and how everything is, time isn't this linear thing. It kind of overlaps in all these moments. And I was like, this is an interesting topic, time. And so I just kind of sat there with it for a while. And that's how the short story was created. It was this idea of like all the things that we don't say or we don't do because we think, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll talk to that person the next day. You just don't know what time's going to bring you. It's not something that's a guarantee in any aspect. And I've moved 15 times in my life. So, for me, there's been a lot of, bouncing around. And that last time that you have a conversation with somebody, you don't think about all those little moments, right, in our life. And the enemy of time was created from all of that. And basically, my own brain, like my storm in my brain, was put into this little story. And again, I think it was a 4-page short story. I had the beginning and I had the end, and I had this kind of middle that played into this theme. And I gave the story to my teacher for grading, and I thought, oh gosh, she's either going to think this is great or that I need therapy, one of the two. And and she read it, and she told me that it was a story that connected with her so deeply that she thought that it needed to be expanded into a bigger format. And I didn't understand what she meant by that, or how to do that, or how do you take a short story that really only has, at the time, it had truly 2 characters, and how do I take that and expand it into this whole world? And I kind of shelved it for a little bit and came back to it because it was one of those things that just kept kind of gnawing at me, and I really wanted to explore the concept a little bit deeper. So then I started writing what I consider backwards. I had this ending that I knew needed to be said the way it was done in the short story, and the ending is almost identical to the short story to this day. And that's because I truly wrote it backwards from that, and building these characters and building this world that was to equal up, this message. And so every scene, you can literally see, like on my floor of my kitchen, I had note cards of all of these scenes I wanted. I just didn't know where they needed to go, and how to create how to make this message land with the scenes. And so we basically couldn't eat for 2 weeks because no one could step foot in the kitchen, because that's where I decided to. Super genius idea. That's where the ADHD comes in. I'm like, oh, I'm going to finish this in a day. 3 weeks later, the kitchen is covered in note cards with tape. I'm like everywhere. And I take a picture with my phone on top on a ladder trying to get this board all together. But that's really how it came to be. It was all from this one short story and this one moment where a teacher pushed me to really think and to think outside the box and ask myself a question that ended up asking the reader a question.
It is so cool to hear about your process. As a writer myself, I think it's so fascinating that you started with the end. And I'm wondering, as you were putting together, all of these note cards all across your kitchen, were they scenes that you had written already, or were they kind of little buds of ideas that you had kind of jotted down?
It was a big mix of everything. There was both in that there were scenes that I had fully fleshed out and chapters I had fully fleshed out that I wanted 1000% in the story, and then there was these little ideas, and I call them like a string that tied everything together. And I was like, okay, I need these scenes to tie this moment together, to tie this message together. And that's really how it ended up coming together, was through these big moments that needed to be in the story, and were kind of those points, 3 act story structure were those points that needed to excel the whole story forward. But then having, my favorite part is those in between moments that maybe aren't pushing everything forward, but really tie it all together, because there's such a beauty in those slow moments in a story. And that's what I really got to do with those scenes that weren't fully written or had any life to them quite yet. And then I allowed the rest of the story to give those little in between moments their voice.